Move forward! Move forward! Let's go! Keep moving!
Europe was already bleeding when winter came. By late 1944, the continent had been fighting nonstop for more than 5 years. Cities lay in ruins. Railways were twisted wreckage. Entire generations of young men were gone. Yet in Washington and London, maps were still being drawn with bold arrows and optimistic timelines. The Allied command believed Germany was finally collapsing. They believed victory was inevitable. But war has a way of punishing confidence. On December 16th, 1944, more than 200,000 German troops surged through the Ardennes forest, smashing into unsuspecting American lines. Entire divisions were caught off guard. Towns fell overnight. Roads clogged with refugees and retreating soldiers. Tanks rolled through fog and snow. Within days, the front bulged outward under the weight of Hitler's last gamble. Nearly 90,000 American casualties would follow. It became known as the Battle of the Bulge, the largest and bloodiest battle the United States Army ever fought in World War II. But 3 weeks earlier, that battle might have been prevented, and almost no one knows why it wasn't. 3 weeks before the Ardennes exploded, an American general stood on the western bank of the Rhine River. His patrols had crossed quietly into Germany. They found something unbelievable. The feared Siegfried Line bunkers were empty. The fortifications intelligence claimed would cost thousands of lives to breach were unmanned. Germany's western door was standing open. The general's name was Jacob Devers, and the order that stopped him may have made the Battle of the Bulge inevitable. Jacob Devers was not famous. He did not give dramatic speeches. He did not cultivate journalists. He did not belong to the inner circle of charismatic battlefield commanders whose names filled headlines. He built machines. Before commanding armies, Devers helped develop the Sherman tank. He oversaw the creation of the M-26 Pershing. He pushed through the amphibious DUKW vehicles that would later become essential on D-Day. While other generals chased glory, Devers focused on logistics, engineering, and results. George Marshall noticed. In 1941, as Marshall began building the army that would defeat Hitler, he personally selected 4 officers for rapid promotion. Jacob Devers was one of them. He became one of the youngest major generals in U.S. history. Marshall saw in Devers something rare: competence without ego. By May 1943, Marshall trusted him enough to place him in charge of the European theater when Eisenhower departed for North Africa. For a brief moment, Jacob Devers technically replaced Eisenhower. Eisenhower never forgot that. In August 1944, while the world focused on Normandy and Patton's dash across France, Devers launched an operation almost no one remembers: Operation Dragoon. On August 15th, 150,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches of southern France. Devers commanded the entire operation. 12 American divisions and the French First Army surged inland. The Germans expected weeks of brutal fighting. Instead, they were crushed. Marseille fell in less than 2 weeks. The German 19th Army collapsed while retreating up the Rhone Valley. By mid-September, Devers had liberated more French territory than either Bradley or Montgomery. His casualties were far lower. His supply lines were stronger because he captured intact ports. The 6th Army Group under Devers became the most successful Allied force in France. Almost nobody back home noticed. By November 1944, Allied momentum was fading everywhere except Devers' sector. Montgomery was stalled in the north. Bradley's armies were bleeding in the Hurtgen forest, suffering tens of thousands of casualties for gains measured in yards. The broad front strategy was grinding into stalemate, but Devers kept winning. On November 23rd, his forces liberated Strasbourg. French civilians wept as their tricolor rose over a city occupied since 1940. And then Devers' forward elements reached the Rhine River. American patrols crossed into Germany. They found the bunkers empty. They found bridges undefended. They found the western wall of Hitler's empire abandoned. German units had been pulled north to face Patton and Bradley. Devers immediately understood what he was seeing. If his forces crossed now, they would be inside Germany before Christmas. They could roll north behind the Siegfried Line. They could cut off German armies facing Patton. They could end the war in weeks. He sent urgent messages to Eisenhower's headquarters. He had the men. He had the supplies. He had momentum. All he needed was permission. He waited. The hours passed. German units continued withdrawing. The door remained open. Finally, Eisenhower did not give approval. He invited Devers to a meeting. November 24th, 1944. The Heritage Hotel in Vittel, France. Devers walked into a room with Dwight Eisenhower, Omar Bradley, and George Patton, 3 West Point men, 3 members of the inner circle. Devers was the outsider. He presented his case. German defenses on the Rhine were empty. His patrols confirmed it. This was the chance of the war. Bradley objected. Intelligence predicted strong resistance. Devers pushed back. His men had physically walked through abandoned bunkers. The argument grew heated. It lasted until early morning. Eisenhower made his decision. No Rhine crossing. Devers would halt preparations and redirect his forces north. The broad front strategy required coordination. Devers was too far ahead. He must wait. Devers walked out into the cold November night, knowing something had died in that room. Not just his offensive, his faith in the system. That night, he wrote in his diary that he felt like he did not belong to the same team. He was right. Eisenhower and Bradley were classmates from West Point, class of 1915. Patton had been part of their circle for decades. They shared careers, favors, trust. They protected each other. Devers had built his career on competence, not connections. Eisenhower disliked him. Only George Marshall's protection kept Devers in command. Instead of crossing the Rhine, Devers was ordered to clear the Colmar pocket, a secondary objective. Strategically reasonable, historically catastrophic. His soldiers turned away from Germany's undefended heart and began grinding through frozen Alsace. Momentum evaporated. Victory turned into attrition. And German intelligence noticed. They had feared Devers. They had prepared to divert divisions south. Now the pressure stopped. Those divisions became available. Hitler had been planning a massive counteroffensive since September. An attack through the Ardennes to split Allied armies and seize Antwerp. He needed tanks. He needed infantry. He needed every unit he could scrape together. Devers' halted advance made it possible. 3 weeks later, German forces smashed into the Ardennes. Some of the panzer divisions that struck American lines had been earmarked to defend the Rhine, a crossing that never came. The Battle of the Bulge became 6 weeks of frozen hell. The 101st Airborne surrounded at Bastogne. Soldiers holding crossroads against armor. Entire companies erased. When it ended, nearly 19,000 Americans were dead. Another 47,000 wounded. 23,000 missing or captured. Every frozen foxhole traced back to that warm hotel room in Vittel. Brigadier General Garrison Davidson later wrote that had Devers crossed the Rhine in late November, the Bulge would likely never have happened. The war could have ended months earlier, but history quietly erased the meeting. Eisenhower's memoirs omit it. Bradley never mentioned it. Only Devers' diary and staff notes preserve the moment. On March 8, 1945, George Marshall promoted Jacob Devers to 4-star general. 4 days later, he promoted Bradley. Marshall made his judgment clear. Devers went on to capture Stuttgart, Nuremberg, Munich, Dachau. His forces seized Hitler's Eagle's Nest. But the spotlight never followed. History remembered Patton's dash, Montgomery's caution, Eisenhower's leadership. Jacob Devers became the forgotten 4-star. The man who almost ended the war early. The man stopped by his own side. The Battle of the Bulge did not have to happen. The door to Germany stood open, and the general who could have walked through it was ordered to stand down.